Richard Goodall never looked like the kind of man who would one day be standing under the golden confetti of America's Got Talent. A quiet janitor from Terre Haute, Indiana, he had spent over 2 decades cleaning hallways, sweeping classrooms, and singing softly as students passed by. When he stepped onto the AGT stage in 2024, his voice carried the weight of decades of struggle, heartbreak, and survival. But what the audience didn't see under the stage lights was a man who had lived through grief that nearly silenced him forever. His journey since winning has been as moving and as tragic as the songs he sings. From hallways to a golden buzzer. For 23 years, Richard Goodall walked the same halls at Chauncey Rose Middle School in Terre Haute, Indiana. He was a familiar figure to students, not only because of the broom and mop in his hands, but because of the voice that often echoed through the corridors. He was affectionately known as the singing janitor, the man who could brighten an ordinary school day by belting out a song as he swept floors or emptied trash cans. For the kids who passed him each morning, he wasn't just a custodian. He was living proof that music could turn even the most mundane spaces into something extraordinary. Students and staff often urged him to share his gift beyond the walls of the school. They saw something remarkable in his voice, something that deserved more than casual performances in a hallway. But Richard was hesitant. Life had already shown him how fragile dreams could be, and he carried the weight of rejection from earlier attempts. Years before, he had submitted a video audition to The Voice, pouring every ounce of emotion into his rendition of Journey's Don't Stop Believin'. The reply came in the form of a short email. He hadn't been chosen to move forward. For Richard, it was a crushing reminder of how cold the entertainment industry could be. Still, he didn't stop singing. Instead, he leaned on the encouragement of the children around him, kids who insisted that his voice was too powerful to be confined to a school hallway. That steady encouragement eventually gave him the courage to try again. In 2024, Richard took the leap and auditioned for America's Got Talent. It was a step far outside his comfort zone, marked by another first, boarding an airplane. Until then, he had never left his small Indiana community, never had reason to fly across the country. The idea of singing on a national stage was overwhelming, but he carried with him the voices of the students who believed in him. When the moment came, he chose the song that had followed him through rejection and resilience, Journey's anthem, Don't Stop Believin'. From the first note, the theater grew still. His delivery wasn't polished like a seasoned professional, but it was raw, authentic, and filled with the kind of emotion that only comes from lived experience. Simon Cowell, often the harshest critic, called him extraordinary. Sofia Vergara praised his spirit and authenticity. And then came the moment that would change his life. Heidi Klum slammed the golden buzzer. Golden confetti rained down as Richard stood stunned, tears filling his eyes. The clip of his performance spread rapidly online, racking up millions of views and turning him overnight into a symbol of hope. For a man who had spent decades working in obscurity, it felt surreal. He was no longer just a janitor in Terre Haute. He was Richard Goodall, a voice that touched the nation. Yet even in that moment of triumph, Richard knew something many overlooked. Dreams were fragile, and the road ahead would not be simple. The loss that nearly broke him. Long before the golden confetti of America's Got Talent fell around him, Richard Goodall endured a heartbreak that nearly silenced his voice forever. For 30 years, he shared his life with his wife, Patty. Their relationship was built on everyday joys, the comfort of cooking together, the laughter over simple meals, the kind of steady companionship that turns ordinary routines into cherished memories. Patty was more than Richard's wife. She was his anchor, his confidant, and the person who believed in him long before the world knew his name. In early 2021, everything changed. Patty was diagnosed with kidney cancer, a blow that shook the foundation of their quiet life. Richard did everything he could to be at her side, driving her to appointments, sitting with her through treatments, and trying to stay strong even when fear consumed him. He prayed for a miracle and held on to hope, but cancer is relentless. On June 19, 2021, after months of struggle, Patty passed away, leaving Richard in a silence far heavier than any empty hallway at the school where he worked. Her death devastated him. On Instagram, he posted a raw and emotional tribute, admitting that he had tried everything to save her but felt powerless against the disease. Friends and former students reached out with condolences, but the grief was his alone to carry. Their home, once filled with warmth and shared routines, became a place of painful reminders. The kitchen where they once experimented with recipes stood quiet. The meals he had proudly photographed for social media stopped appearing. What had been snapshots of happiness were replaced with long gaps of silence. For months, Richard couldn't bring himself to sing. Music, once his escape, now reminded him of what he had lost. The man who had filled classrooms with his voice now struggled to even hum a melody. Nights were long and days blurred into one another as he wrestled with a grief that threatened to consume him. It would have been easy to let the music go, to resign himself to the quiet sorrow of a widower's life. But slowly, piece by piece, Richard found a way to breathe again. He returned to a local bar where karaoke nights offered a small stage and no pressure. Taking the microphone in his hands, he sang not for fame or recognition, but for survival. Each note felt like a step forward, a way of clawing back the part of himself that grief had stolen. It didn't erase the pain, but it gave him a reason to keep moving. The man who would one day stand on the AGT stage was not just a janitor with a hidden gift. He was a widower who had been forced to sing through tears. That weight of loss, carried in every lyric, may explain why his performances resonated so deeply. His voice was not only about talent, it was about survival, heartbreak, and the determination to keep believing even when life tried to silence him. Finding love again and rebuilding with Angie. After years of carrying grief, Richard never imagined he would find love again. Yet, in the unlikeliest of ways, life gave him another chance. On New Year's Eve of 2022, he met Angie through Facebook after she followed the page of the bar where he often sang karaoke. What began as casual conversation soon grew into something deeper. They bonded over shared values, laughter, and a mutual respect for the small joys in life. Slowly, Richard allowed himself to open his heart again, even while the memory of Patty remained close. By the time Richard's audition for America's Got Talent came in 2024, Angie was by his side, supporting him every step of the way. She encouraged him when nerves crept in, grounded him when sudden fame felt overwhelming, and reminded him that love and family mattered more than applause. Their relationship deepened as the competition progressed, and just days before the AGT finale, Richard and Angie exchanged vows in a small ceremony in California. The wedding was intimate, attended by friends and some members of the AGT family. It was a moment of stability for Richard in the whirlwind of television lights and pressure. Marriage to Angie gave him more than companionship. It gave him a renewed sense of purpose. On Instagram, Richard began posting photos again, this time of meals he and Angie cooked together, much like he had once shared with Patty. It was a quiet reminder that though loss had marked him, love had found its way back into his life. Angie kept him humble, reminding him of his roots even as millions now knew his name. While many contestants see AGT as a launch pad to fame, Richard saw it as part of a larger journey, one where music, love, and resilience were intertwined, balancing fame and a janitor's life. Winning the Golden Buzzer and eventually the AGT crown in 2024 changed Richard Goodall's life, but not in the way most expected. Unlike many winners who rushed to sign record deals or moved to Los Angeles, Richard returned to Terre Haute and kept working as a janitor. To him, the school was more than a paycheck. It was his community, his comfort zone, and the place where his dream had quietly lived for decades. He continued to sweep floors, take out trash, and sing in the hallways, even as television audiences now recognized him on the street. This balance was never easy. Performing meant traveling, and travel required money. Despite the million-dollar prize promised by AGT, financial reality was far more complicated. California was expensive, flights were draining, and he often relied on community fundraisers just to cover basic competition costs. His hometown rallied behind him in extraordinary ways. Neighbors, teachers, and strangers donated over $115,000 through GoFundMe campaigns so he could travel and compete. Richard never forgot their generosity. He spoke openly about how surreal it felt that his small town lifted him high enough to chase a dream he couldn't have afforded on his own. Yet, even with support, Richard's life after AGT wasn't glamorous. He admitted in interviews that he sometimes struggled with the idea of leaving his janitorial job behind. Fame felt fleeting, while his work at the school gave him stability. "It makes me feel secure," he said more than once, emphasizing that no matter how many stages he sang on, he still belonged to Terre Haute. This tug-of-war between fame and routine shaped his days in 2024, showing that behind the golden confetti was still the man who once sang quietly in empty hallways. The victory, backlash, and his AGT finale. As season 19 of America's Got Talent moved into its final stretch in late 2024, Richard Goodall faced both triumph and pressure unlike anything before. In the semifinals, he delivered a stirring rendition of Journey's "Faithfully," even performing the night before his wedding to Angie. The timing was overwhelming, marriage and competition colliding within hours, but Richard remained steady, balancing joy with determination. Judges praised his resilience, with Howie Mandel predicting that his voice was strong enough to win the $1 million prize. The finale became the defining moment of his life. Richard returned to the song that had first introduced him to the world, "Don't Stop Believin'." But this time, he was not alone. Journey's legendary guitarist, Neil Schon, stood by his side, turning the stage into a surreal dream. Richard, dressed in black, sang with a confidence far beyond his trembling audition months earlier. The audience erupted, singing along, and the judges were visibly moved. It was the kind of finale that blurred the line between television contest and once-in-a-lifetime concert. When Terry Crews announced him as the season 19 winner, golden confetti once again rained down. But victory was bittersweet. His competitor, Israeli dog trainer Ronnie Sagi, had just learned that her father had passed away moments after she was named runner-up. The night was filled with both triumph and tragedy, and Richard, with tears in his eyes, shared in her grief while accepting his own crown. Not everyone embraced his win. Online, some critics claimed he only succeeded because of pity, suggesting that other acts were more deserving. Yet many defended him, pointing out that millions of Americans had voted and that his heartfelt performances carried a power that could not be denied. Richard himself remained humble, insisting that he never chased fame. He only wanted to share music. In the end, his finale showed that even a small-town janitor could command a stage alongside legends. Life After AGT, Podcast Revelations, and 2025 Updates. After the confetti settled and the television cameras turned away, Richard Goodall returned home to Terre Haute to face a quieter but no less meaningful reality. In January 2025, he appeared on the Tell Us About Yourself podcast, offering one of his most candid reflections since winning AGT. Sitting with host Chris Carrion, Richard admitted that he was still working as a janitor even while performing gigs on the side. Fame hadn't erased the life he built for over 2 decades, nor did it change his connection to the school where children still saw him as Mr. Goodall, the singing janitor. He spoke honestly about his perspective on success. "Never at any point did I ever have any aspirations to perform," he said. "I mean, I've always wanted to perform, but it's never been a drive of me to be famous or be noticed. It's more of a music and people thing than a, hey, here I am, notice me type thing." His words surprised many listeners, especially those who assumed a talent show champion would leap into the spotlight full-time. Instead, Richard emphasized that his love for music was tied to moments of connection, not celebrity. Looking back on AGT, he described each song as a time capsule into people's lives, explaining that music has the power to transport listeners to specific memories. He credited the show for changing his life, not by making him famous, but by reminding him of the impact his voice could have. Still, he acknowledged that if opportunities in music grew, he might eventually have to make a choice between sweeping hallways and standing on stages. For now, however, he continues to straddle both worlds, holding on to his roots while cautiously stepping into new possibilities. Richard's story after AGT is not one of sudden stardom, but of quiet strength. He remains grounded in his small town, faithful to his community, and devoted to his wife Angie. His journey has shown that sometimes the most powerful victories are not about leaving home behind, but about staying true to it. Richard Goodall's story is more than a tale of a singing janitor who won a talent show. It's about grief, resilience, love, and the courage to stay grounded when the world pulls you toward fame. From the heartbreak of losing Patty, to the joy of marrying Angie, and the struggle of balancing his job with a sudden spotlight, Richard has shown that triumph and tragedy often live side by side. But what do you think? Should Richard continue working as a janitor while performing on the side, or should he take the leap and chase music full-time? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and click the bell so you don't miss the next story.